Melissa felt really sad after her grandma passed away. She missed her a lot. Her grandma used to say that everything would be okay and that she believed in Melissa. Those were some of the last things her grandma said before she died. Melissa and her grandma lived together since Melissa was born. She never knew her parents and didn't want to make her grandma sad by asking about them. Melissa thought maybe her parents left her because they had other things to do. Lots of people visited Melissa's grandma. Some were nice and some were not. Melissa would stay in her room when they came over because she didn't want to bother them. She knew her grandma was helping them with things. As Melissa got older, she started to understand more about the world. She realized it was different from what she thought before. Melissa thought her grandma knew a lot of things that others didn't, and as she grew up, she started to understand those things too. Sometimes it made her cry because it was scary. One day, Melissa was crying in her room again. Her grandma heard her and came in quietly to see if she was okay. Melissa said she was fine, so her grandma came in and asked what was wrong. Melissa told her grandma that she was scared. Her grandma gave her a hug and asked why she was scared. Melissa told her grandma everything. Her grandma hugged her tightly and said she was worried this might happen, that Melissa would inherit her gift. After her grandma passed away, Melissa didn't know what to do. She was only 15 and worried she would have to go to an orphanage and then to a foster home. Melissa didn't want that, so she decided to run away and hide somewhere far away. She didn't know why she made that decision, but she hoped it would work out somehow. Mr. Wesley Harris kissed his daughter on the forehead and promised to come home earlier. Chelsea sighed and told her dad it was okay for him to be at work a lot. She reassured him that she would be fine. Wesley suggested having a movie night to cheer her up. Chelsea agreed with her dad, saying she'd be okay and wanted to talk to him about something. "What is it, sweetheart?" Mr. Harris asked. Chelsea asked if they could try to find someone. "Are you sure, honey?" her father asked, concerned. Chelsea didn't want a caregiver who only did medical stuff and treated her like a kid. She wanted someone she could talk to. She didn't like the nurses from agencies because they felt fake and cold, like robots following rules. She wanted someone real. Wesley kissed his daughter again and promised to find a solution. As he went to work, he couldn't shake off how strange life had become. Just 5 years ago, he had a happy family, but now his wife had died in a car crash, and his daughter was seriously ill and bedridden. Despite spending a lot on her medicine, Chelsea's health was deteriorating, and the doctors weren't hopeful. At first, Chelsea's illness wasn't so scary. She got treatment and seemed like any other kid, but things took a turn for the worse. Chelsea started losing weight fast and became very weak. It had been a year, and she could barely leave her bed. Lately, she'd been in more pain, and it broke Wesley's heart to see her suffer. Despite doctors' prescriptions, the painkillers didn't seem to help much, and Chelsea was becoming resistant to stronger ones. When Wesley arrived at work, his driver asked if he could leave early because his wife was being discharged from the hospital. "Congratulations. Of course, go ahead. Let me know if you need anything," Wesley said. The driver thanked him and asked if he could take a day off tomorrow. "Sure, take it. By the way, is it a boy or a girl?" "It's a girl. We named her Melissa." Wesley smiled and complimented the name Melissa. He wished his driver congratulations again and headed to his office. Despite the bustling activity around him, life seemed dull and dreary at home. While others celebrated weddings and births, his family silently waited for what would come next. The hardest part for Wesley was staying strong and not crumbling under the weight of it all. He tried his best to support Chelsea and smiled as much as he could. Chelsea was smart and mature, handling her condition remarkably well, but it pained Wesley to see her confined to her bed, knowing there was little hope for improvement. His secretary interrupted his thoughts, asking him to sign some papers. "Andy, I need your help. I'm looking for someone to spend time with my daughter, not from an agency, someone real." "That's tricky. Maybe someone her age or someone in need of a place to stay," Andy suggested. "Yeah, we could try that. Okay, give me the papers," Wesley said, ready to explore this idea. Wesley finished his work early to keep his promise to Chelsea. He decided to stop by a convenience store to buy her some sweets, even though the housekeeper and doctor said she shouldn't have sugar. Wesley knew a chocolate bar would make her happy, even if it wasn't the healthiest choice. As he left the store, he noticed a girl standing outside who seemed troubled. Despite not looking homeless, Wesley felt she needed help. He approached her and asked if she needed assistance. The girl was initially scared but then smiled and asked for some spare change. She explained she was out of money and hungry. Wesley spotted a nearby restaurant and offered to buy her some food. "Thank you so much, sir. This is really embarrassing," the girl said. "No need to feel embarrassed. Let's get you something to eat," Wesley replied kindly. As they walked to the restaurant, Wesley couldn't help but think about the girl's age. She seemed to be about 15 or 16, just like his daughter Chelsea. But there was something in her eyes that made her seem older. The girl ate eagerly, and watching her made Wesley hungry too. Suddenly, he had an idea. "I'm sorry, I never asked your name," Wesley said. "I'm Melissa," the girl replied. "Melissa, where are your parents? Do you live with them?" Melissa paused. "I don't really know them. I used to live with my grandma in a trailer park, but she passed away 7 months ago, so I moved to the city." "Do you have somewhere to stay?" Wesley asked. Melissa shrugged. "I was staying with my grandma's friend for a while, helping out around the house, but then her kids took her to another city." "So, you're saying you have nowhere to go?" Wesley asked. Melissa nodded. "I guess not. Would you like to come live with us? I have a daughter," Wesley offered. "Is she sick?" "How do you know?" Melissa asked, surprised. Melissa noticed Wesley's confusion and explained how she figured out he had a daughter who was sick. "You're pretty sharp. How old are you?" Wesley asked. "I'll be 16 soon," Melissa replied. "Do you have any identification with you?" Wesley inquired. "It's at the mall nearby. A nice janitor lets me keep my stuff there. Sometimes I help him clean and he lets me stay," Melissa explained. Wesley considered the situation. He liked Melissa. "So, what do you think? Want to come live with us? We have a nurse and a housekeeper. My daughter just needs someone to talk to," Wesley offered. "I understand. Yeah, I can do that," Melissa agreed. "You barely know me, yet you agreed to come with me," Wesley remarked. "Don't worry. I trust you," Melissa replied. "How much do you think I should pay you?" Wesley asked. "You don't have to pay me anything," Melissa said, kindly declining. Wesley thought Melissa was very innocent and genuine. They were in a car, driving past the bright lights of the city, and Melissa was gazing out the window. Wesley saw this as an opportunity to discuss his daughter. "So, Melissa, let me tell you about Chelsea." "You don't really have to. If she wants to, she'll share her story with me when she's ready," Melissa replied. Wesley agreed with a nod. He was still perplexed and curious about where Melissa had actually come from. When they got to his house, Wesley first showed Melissa her bedroom. She really liked it. "It's beautiful. I've never had a bed like that. Make yourself at home. You can unpack while I step out for a bit," Wesley said. Melissa was thrilled with her own bedroom. She meticulously unpacked her belongings and arranged her clothes tightly in the closet. After finishing, Melissa silently left her room and walked into the hallway where Wesley was walking towards her. He stopped and said that it was time for her to meet Chelsea. Chelsea was sitting in her bed, looking out the window. "Hey, honey." Chelsea slowly turned around and smiled. "Hey, Dad." "Melissa, this is my daughter, Chelsea, and Chelsea, this is Melissa," Wesley introduced them. "Nice to meet you, Melissa," Chelsea said, looking at Melissa with great interest. "She is a really nice young lady. I'm sure you will get along well and make really good friends," Wesley added. "All right, you two go ahead and get to know each other. I'll go change," Wesley said. Melissa slowly walked over to Chelsea's bed and looked at her without saying anything. "Hi," she said. "Hi," Chelsea replied. Chelsea could feel that Melissa was looking deep into her soul. She had a weird feeling. Chelsea was a bit frightened and looked at Melissa, but then Melissa smiled. "Don't be scared. Everything's gonna be all right," Melissa said. Gradually, the awkward tension between them subsided, and they started talking. By the time Wesley came back, Chelsea was laughing. As he walked in and saw them, he froze. He hadn't seen her beaming and heard this laughter for the last couple of years. Melissa was telling her how her grandma would have herbal teas every time to make her memory better. She kept losing her shiny things and thought that she was forgetting them somewhere, and it turned out that a magpie was flying in and stealing them. "Are you guys having fun?" Chelsea turned to her dad and said, "We are." With that, Wesley said that dinner would be ready in an hour. He was expecting a refusal from his daughter as usual. This time, Chelsea said, "Dad, do you think we can move my bed to the kitchen? I want to eat there." Wesley was shocked. "Of course, honey. Let me get the chair instead. They had purchased a special chair for her a long time ago, but Chelsea never used it. She had totally been against it. Wesley instructed the housekeeper to prepare a table for 3 people, which surprised her. However, when she noticed Chelsea chatting animatedly with another girl, she quickly got to work. Chelsea couldn't eat a lot, but she had a hearty appetite. It was peculiar and uncommon. It was the first time she ate well. For a brief moment, Wesley began to question what the doctors had told him, but he realized that doctors from 3 different countries can be wrong at the same time. Before going to bed, Melissa noticed that Chelsea was curled up in pain. "Melissa, can you call the housekeeper? I need a shot," Chelsea said. But Melissa walked up to Chelsea and put her palm on top of her head. After a minute, Chelsea began to feel that the pain was subsiding. She had never felt anything like that before. She wanted to ask how Melissa was doing that, but she couldn't. Her eyes were drooping, and she felt like she was falling asleep. Melissa stood up to shut the door and saw the housekeeper hurrying to give Chelsea a shot. "Excuse me, ma'am. She's better. She fell asleep." "What do you mean she's sleeping? What about the—" The housekeeper appeared inside and saw Chelsea was indeed asleep. "That's impossible." 2 weeks passed, and Chelsea had changed a lot. Wesley was astonished. He saw how Melissa was leading her by the hand carefully. For the first time in the last few years, Chelsea got out into the yard. Wesley couldn't believe what he was seeing, but he was still wary that it could be something temporary. "Mr. Harris, where did you find this girl?" the housekeeper asked. "You won't believe it, but I met her on the street outside a store." "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's fine. I mean, I don't know how to say this, but she's a bit strange. She knows everything. The other day she predicted that it was going to rain in 10 minutes. She told me that my son's sore throat needs to be treated with some kind of herb. I mean, look how much Chelsea has changed. Are you telling me she's some kind of clairvoyant or something? I don't know. I don't really believe those things, but I just don't understand how." Wesley smiled, but he agreed with the housekeeper. Melissa had a piercing gaze. In the morning, Wesley was getting ready for work. Melissa walked out to him from her room. "Mr. Harris, do you have to go to work today?" "Yes. Is everything okay? Can you stay home today, please?" "Why, Melissa? What's going on?" "I have a lot of things to do at the office." Melissa kept begging him not to go anywhere and to tell his driver to stay in the city today. Wesley didn't know why he agreed to listen to her. In the end, he decided he could probably work from home today. When he turned on the TV, he saw that there was a terrible accident on the highway involving a dozen cars. It happened exactly at the exit he was supposed to take and at around the time he usually passes through that area. He immediately got a call from his driver. The driver talked for a while and thanked Mr. Harris for letting him stay in the city today. Wesley got up and headed for Melissa's room. He couldn't take it anymore. He really wanted to know who she really was. He knocked on her door, but there was no response. Then he walked towards Chelsea's room, and as he was approaching, he heard loud noises. They were arguing about something. He stood behind a slightly open door and looked through. Melissa was shouting at Chelsea. "Get up now." "I can't." "Who told you you can't?" "But I'm really sick. I can't walk." "I'm not supposed to walk." "But you're still alive. Give me your hand." Wesley froze because Chelsea put her right foot on the floor, then the left, and then she got up. She wobbled immediately, and Wesley was about to lunge, but Melissa had already had her shoulder up for her. "There you go. Good job, Chelsea," Melissa told her. "And you were telling me you were destined to be in bed." Chelsea burst out laughing.
My wife told me she's pregnant, but I can't be the dad because I can't have kids. Still, I act like I am. I'm 38 and married my wife, who's 33, 2 years ago. We dated for 3 years before that. She wanted to get married more than I did, so I agreed to make her happy. About a year ago, we tried to have a baby, mainly because my wife wanted to. It was tough emotionally, and my wife wasn't very nice during this time. I tried to cope with her behavior, but it was too much. Eventually, I got tested and found out I can't have kids. It really hurt because even though I wasn't initially keen on having a baby, I started to imagine myself as a dad and really wanted it. Finding out I couldn't be a dad was devastating, but the hardest part was yet to come. I struggled to gather the courage to tell my wife that I was the reason we couldn't have a baby. I was scared of how she'd react, especially considering how she'd been treating me lately. I couldn't bear the thought of her disappointment when she realized we might never have children together. So I waited a few days after getting my test results before telling her. But before I could, she surprised me. Just 4 days after learning I was sterile, she sat me down and said she had important news. I was terrified, thinking she somehow knew about my condition. But no, her news was different. She was pregnant. I was completely shocked by what she said, but I pretended to be happy for her. The next day, I got tested again to be sure about my sterility, and the results were the same. I felt lost because if I wasn't the father, then she must have been cheating on me. The fertility treatments she would need were expensive, and she couldn't have afforded them without my help. So it seemed clear she was cheating. It was such a strange and awful thought that I didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, my wife was busy planning a big party to announce her pregnancy. She looked so happy, and I felt crushed inside. But I had to hide my emotions because I needed to figure out what was going on. I kept everything to myself, not even telling my family. It was too personal and awkward to share with anyone. I couldn't confront my wife either. Too much time had passed, and I needed to know who the real father was before I said anything. Fortunately, I found out at the party. Many people were there, including our families, friends, and some of my colleagues. She even invited our neighbor from across the street, a 27-year-old guy who's a model. He's undeniably good-looking, probably better looking than me or most people given his profession. He moved in with his aunt, who lives nearby, to pursue his modeling career since his own family lives far away. My wife always had a soft spot for this guy. When he first moved in, she'd cook for him and his aunt, and he'd even joined us for dinner a few times. We'd chat about his work, and he seemed well-spoken and educated. He's a literature major like my wife, so they hit it off instantly. I didn't mind him, he seemed nice, and I trusted my wife. But on the day of the party when he arrived, I noticed a change in her demeanor. Her eyes lit up, and she rushed to greet him with a longer hug than she gave anyone else. While others didn't seem to notice, I did, and it felt like something was brewing between them. I needed to confirm my suspicions, so I pretended to go to the bathroom but sneaked into the bedroom to check her laptop. It was harder to access than her phone, as she was always using it whenever I was home. Whenever I asked her what she was doing on her laptop, she'd deflect and claim she was working on her novel, a project she'd been immersed in for months. I respected her privacy and believed her, thinking she was genuinely focused on her writing. But now, with suspicions rising, I doubted there was a novel at all. It seemed more like an excuse to keep me from seeing her screen. Luckily, there was no password, though I could easily access it. After some searching, I discovered another email account she had. I switched to it and found a trove of emails exchanged between her and our neighbor. They were full of love confessions from both sides, and in the more recent ones, she told him about her pregnancy. He didn't take the news well, leading to a pause in their correspondence, likely because he wanted to end things. But my wife wasn't ready to give up on him. Then I received the most shocking email of all. She told him she'd consulted a lawyer friend about filing for divorce right after the baby's birth. She admitted that the reason she pushed for a baby was to secure alimony and child support, enabling her to leave me for our neighbor shortly after and start a new life with him. Reading that email filled me with horror, and even now, the sickening feeling returns whenever I think about it. Pushing aside my emotions, I focused on the task at hand. I discreetly took several photos of the incriminating email with my phone before shutting down her laptop and returning it to its place. While the infidelity hurt, what disgusted me most was her calculated plan to deceive me. Cheating was one thing, but manipulating me into parenthood to finance her fantasy life with her lover was beyond comprehension. And to top it all off, she played the role of a happy wife so convincingly that I hadn't suspected a thing. Her joy seemed almost unsettling, but my anger drove me to seek revenge. I resolved to bide my time and reveal the truth when she least expected it. I couldn't let her off the hook without experiencing the pain, betrayal, and frustration I endured upon discovering her deceit. Some might call me vengeful, but I felt it was necessary. So for the next 9 months, I played the part of the perfect husband and soon-to-be father. It was challenging knowing she was lying to my face, but her deception only fueled my determination. I accompanied her to every doctor's appointment, ensured she took her vitamins, and portrayed the ideal partner. Then finally, a few days ago, my wife went into labor. Adding insult to injury, she was such a skilled actress that I hadn't suspected a thing. Her facade of happiness was almost eerie, but my anger drove me to seek retribution. I resolved to play along and then deliver the crushing blow when she least expected it. There was no way I would let her escape the consequences without experiencing the pain, betrayal, and frustration I felt upon discovering her deception. Some might label me as unstable, but I felt justified in my actions. For the next 9 months, I meticulously portrayed the role of the perfect husband and expectant father. It was difficult knowing she was deceiving me, but her falsehoods only fueled my determination. I attended every doctor's appointment, ensured she took her vitamins punctually, and endeavored to be the ideal spouse. Then, finally, just a few days ago, my wife went into labor. My heart raced as I left the hospital, feeling like I might need a hospital bed myself. I quickly dialed our neighbor to let him know my wife was in labor, not bothering to wait for his response before hanging up. Jumping into my car, I waited anxiously for my wife's family to arrive. As soon as I spotted her dad's car pulling into the driveway, I wasted no time in getting out of there. I turned off my phone and drove until I reached a motel on the outskirts of town. I'd already packed my bags weeks ago and stashed them in the trunk, ensuring I had everything I needed and wouldn't be caught off guard. The rest of the day was spent trying to distract myself with TV and beer, anything to escape the turmoil. Eventually, I drifted off to sleep, feeling a sense of relief that the charade was finally over. The next morning, I woke up and reluctantly turned on my phone. Predictably, there were countless messages from my wife and our neighbor, all of which I ignored. However, I did glance at texts from my parents and brother. It seemed my wife had reached out to them when she couldn't reach me. Feeling a sense of obligation, I called my parents to reassure them and promised to explain everything once I returned home. I even asked them to bring my brother along, as they deserved to understand the situation fully. I drove over to my parents' place, finding my brother already there along with our confused and somewhat irritated parents. Understandably, they were upset because I had missed the birth of my own child, which also meant they missed becoming grandparents in the moment. Sitting them down, I laid out the entire story, explaining my actions and reasoning behind them. By the time I finished, they were left speechless. I braced myself for a barrage of questions and accusations, but surprisingly, there were none. My dad simply expressed a hope that things wouldn't escalate further, and if the others had anything to say, they kept quiet. It seemed things were calm on that front. This happened a few days ago, and although my family hasn't said much, my wife has been relentless in blaming me for ruining her first-time mother experience. She's been calling and texting nonstop since I left, but I've chosen not to respond. Even my neighbor had the nerve to text me a few hours ago, pleading for us to put our differences aside for my wife's sake and attempt to reconcile. It's unbelievable how they're trying to downplay the seriousness of the situation. He even mentioned that my wife had supposedly rekindled her feelings for me during her pregnancy, which supposedly surprised both of them. But I saw right through that deception. If she was falling for me again, why was he still in the picture? They must think I'm incredibly naive. My wife may be upset, but I'm not about to be manipulated into giving our marriage another chance. She's mostly angry because she believes I knew everything from the start, but chose to stay with her and pretend everything was fine. She accuses me of deceiving her by remaining with her throughout her pregnancy, despite knowing the baby wasn't mine and that she'd been cheating with our neighbor. Update 1. It's been almost a week since the baby arrived, and I've been holed up in a hotel room. I haven't visited my wife, nor do I plan to. Despite my clear stance, she continues to bombard me with texts and calls. I haven't blocked her yet, but I've cut off communication with our neighbor, who's been trying to persuade me to reconcile with her. I'm convinced he's only doing it to secure a share of any divorce settlement or alimony, given their financial dependency. While I appreciated my wife being a homemaker, her infidelity is unforgivable. Contrary to accusations, I didn't push her to quit her job. It was her decision and I supported it. I'm confident my lawyer can exempt me from alimony once her infidelity is proven, which should be straightforward. As for our neighbor, he's still struggling professionally, so supporting my wife, a baby, and himself will be challenging. Frankly, I'm relieved to be out of this mess and won't give them anything, not even my attention. I hope my wife sees reason and doesn't contest the divorce, but I'm prepared if she does. I've safeguarded evidence of her deceit, ensuring I'm protected legally. Even if she deletes her email account, I have copies of incriminating exchanges. I'm willing to pay alimony if necessary, but I refuse to stay with her. Despite owning the house, I'm giving her time to leave voluntarily. Hopefully, this ordeal will soon be behind me. Update 2. As expected, my wife's lack of sense has led her to reject the settlement I offered, which I found quite generous considering it covered her expenses during our marriage. I'm baffled by what she hopes to achieve, but it's her choice. Yesterday, she texted to say she's left the house. Today, I returned hoping she'd moved in with her parents. Disappointingly, she's moved across the street to our neighbor's house. I'll have to endure seeing them daily now. I briefly considered returning to a hotel but decided against it. This is my home, and I won't be driven out. I wondered why she didn't move in with her parents, a move that would have favored her in the divorce case. However, her father's text shed some light on the situation. He apologized for her actions and assured me they don't condone them. He even mentioned cutting her off after she expressed a desire to contest the divorce. Her irrational behavior continues to baffle me. Surely, she must realize her actions will backfire. Either she's foolish or has sinister intentions. I hope it's not the latter, but with her, I wouldn't be surprised. Despite the complications this living arrangement brings, I refuse to let them provoke me. Thankfully, I'm saving money by not staying in a hotel. It's been a month since negotiations began, and so far, things aren't looking good for my wife. I've gathered evidence of her infidelity. Update 3. It's been a month since the divorce negotiations started, and things aren't looking good for my wife. I've solidly proven her infidelity, especially since she's now living with the man I accused her of cheating with, providing undeniable evidence of my claims. She attempted to fabricate accusations, claiming I was an alcoholic and the reason for my infertility, suggesting that her affair was justified due to my supposed cruelty during our attempts to conceive. However, his claims were easily disproven, as I quit drinking a year ago when we decided to start a family. It's puzzling why she thought such flimsy excuses would hold up. Perhaps her failed initial plan left her desperate, or perhaps motherhood has consumed her attention, leaving no room for scheming. Regardless, both of us understand her slim chances of receiving alimony. It seems she may have relayed this to her boyfriend, as she was recently ousted from his home, along with their child, amid a tumultuous scene of screaming and name-calling. From my living room window, I witnessed the unsettling scene unfold. The moment I saw him forcibly eject my wife while she held our baby, I cast aside any animosity and rushed to their aid. I couldn't bear to see an innocent child suffer for faults that weren't his own. By the time I reached their doorstep, it was already shut, leaving my wife and son in tears. I swiftly scooped up the baby and reached for my wife's hand, leading them back to my house across the street. With a quick call to my father-in-law, arrangements were made for her to return home. In the following hour, amidst tears and sobs, I comforted both mother and child, playing the role of a comforting presence. Despite my initial urge to involve the authorities, my wife persuaded me to let it pass, not wanting further trouble. She expressed profound remorse for her actions, citing her desperation to be with her lover as the cause for her lapse in judgment. She assured me of her readiness to accept the consequences and forego any further negotiations to expedite the divorce proceedings. While I hope she finds the strength to pursue justice and heal from this ordeal, I take solace in knowing I acted with decency and harbor no regrets.